Hi, my name's Hank McGovern. I talked a little bit about myself in a previous segment, and I started to talk about my book, which is called A Suicide Note of Hope, More Than a Memoir. It has received like 8 advanced acclaims from different psychologists and authors, and it's also received 45 5-star reviews on Amazon at this point. And I started writing the book because I was feeling some suicidal thoughts myself. And as I was having these thoughts, I knew that I needed to do something. So I started actually writing the book. I started to write a suicide note. So the first chapter of the book is called Goodbye. And I start writing about how I'm planning to end my life. So that first chapter is a bit macabre, you might say. However, I then start writing about my childhood in the second chapter, and it's called Early Years, Chaos, Trauma, and Adventure. And I talk about how my mother died when I was 3. She was pushed down the steps, I believe, by my father. However, after she died when I was 3, I continued to live with him until I was 7. And because of his alcoholism, he sent me to live with an aunt in 2nd grade, who my father's relatives thought would keep me. However, she gave me up after a year. To make a long story short, I did live in 10 different homes in my childhood, including the Milton Hershey School, an orphanage in Hershey, Pennsylvania, from where I ran away twice before getting out. I then had a difficult teenage period where I was a juvenile delinquent and got in a bit of trouble here and there before finally graduating, because I was able to live with a cousin who was a police officer, and he was able to put some controls on me, so to speak. Now, I continue in my book talking about death kisses and transformations, and talk about how I came very close to death twice. Was actually given last rites after having a car accident when I was 18, and then a year later, because of a severe depression, I felt suicidal. So that was another close call to death. Next, I start writing about different skills and resources and abilities that I learned because I was becoming a psychologist. So for example, I write a chapter on meditation, which I think has been a salvation for me overall. I've learned different meditations, starting with transcendental meditation, and in most recent years, mindfulness meditation. I then write a chapter on assertive skills, which helped me to stand up for myself, basically, to express my feelings and opinions in a manner that helped me to have a better self-esteem, even though I did have some difficulty in certain areas with assertive skills, getting me in some interpersonal problems at work. So I write about that. The next chapter on cognitive skills, that probably is the most therapeutic. And in that, I learned the skill of tolerance. Tolerance being a skill I'm utilizing at this moment. When I hear a peacock yelling loud and expressing its beautiful vocal sounds to get attention in its own way. So I like to be able to accept and utilize whatever happens. And that peacock was an example of accepting whatever happens and finding a way to utilize it. So the chapter on cognitive skills has gotten some acclaim. For example, the American Association for Suicidology did a review on my book, and they recommend it. for reading. And one of the things that they focused on was that chapter on cognitive skills, specifically Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy by Albert Ellis, who also has given my book some acclaim before he passed in 2008. From that chapter on cognitive skills, I go to a chapter on Ericksonian therapy and hypnosis. I call it Graceful Change and Acceptance. And I talk about the philosophy of Milton Erickson, essentially that being accepting whatever happens and finding a way to utilize it. So, for example, Dr. Erickson had polio, and he was able to accept it and to find a way of managing his pain whereby he was able to teach himself hypnosis. He was really a phenomenal genius and a incredible hypnotist. He was considered the master of medical hypnosis. I basically learned Dr. Erickson's approach to psychology as well as his philosophy. And both Dr. Erickson and Albert Ellis and B.F. Skinner are individuals to whom I dedicate my book. From the chapter on Ericksonian perspectives, I then go to a chapter on endurance athletics, during which I ran 10 marathons and did 28 triathlons. Now, all that started, however, back when I was 10 years old and my father died, and my friend Mike encouraged me to go out for the swim team. And so as I went into swimming, I discovered I was able to feel much better. Swimming was a great antidepressant. So I competed in swimming for some years, and then when I became severely depressed, a psychologist told me that I really needed to start running. And as I started jogging, I felt much better from the depression. So I was able then to run on a regular basis as an antidepressant and also just as a source of competition and enjoyment. So that chapter is called Endurance Skills. And a recent person who reviewed my book, who was a competitive swimmer, made some comments about how much she enjoyed that chapter. From that chapter I go into spiritual skills and basically my evolution in religion. I talk about how I was born a Roman Catholic, but I go through periods where I had questions about the existence of God and different kinds of experiences such as that. I won't go too much into that chapter right now, but instead I'll go to the 10th chapter and the last chapter, which is called Hello. Now, remember, the first chapter was called Goodbye. The 10th chapter is called Hello. Now, during each chapter, I become less and less suicidal. So like at the end of each chapter, I talk about how I feel less suicidal than the last one. And finally, in the chapter called Hello, I have made a decision to live life to its fullest, to be responsible, to create the life that I want to the best of my ability, and to appreciate each moment, each experience that I have, and to make a plan to live a life according to my values. I do mention in the 9th chapter my values of optimism, flexibility, humor, mindfulness, acceptance, compassion, passion, responsibility, and cooperation. And so in the final chapter, I do make a point to mention that throughout the book I have talked about different skills: meditation, cognitive skills, endurance athletics, hypnosis, and how I can use those skills for the rest of my life, and how I leave the reader with some skills to use for themselves if they choose to do so. And so that's all I'm going to say right now about my book, except that you can go to my website to look at some of the customer reviews that people have given. The website is called peacefulmoonpress.com. Again, peacefulmoonpress.com. And you can look at how to purchase the book either through CreateSpace or Amazon, or the best way is to get it from me personally by sending a check to my address, which is on the website. And so that's all I'm going to say about my book for now. And I'm going to talk in the next segment more about a plan to change the national consciousness about suicide, which was the subject of an article in the Greensboro News and Record on May 5th. Okay, thanks a lot.